Hi friends, it's Unicorn, and today let's talk about all the books that I read in the month of June. And I read 9 books in total in June, which frankly I'm pretty impressed by myself. And more importantly, almost all of the books are 4 stars and above, which I'm really happy about because I feel like in May I've read a bunch of mediocre books, and the month of June is a much better reading month for me. And 2 of the books I read for the shortlist for Women's Prize for Fiction. I'll link that video down below for you to check out because I've already wrapped them up, and the books are Demon Copperhead and Pod. I enjoyed both of them in different ways, and they're very different books. And today I thought I would just talk about the other 7 books that I read in June, including 3 fictional books and 4 nonfiction. And let's just talk about them in the order that I read them. The first book that I finished this month is A Murder is Announced by Agatha Christie. I read this book along with the literary fiction that I was reading for the shortlist for Women's Prize, and this is a wonderful change of taste for me, and it's a comfort read because I gotta spend time with Miss Marple. The story started with a newspaper announcing a future murder in a tranquil English town, and Agatha Christie did a brilliant job as usual to create a cozy atmosphere of the town. And all the townspeople, after they saw the announcement on the newspaper, none of them were thinking about inform the police or whatsoever. They were all like, oh my god, there's gonna be a murder tonight, we're gonna see the murder and we're gonna be there on time, which I found hilarious. So indeed, the murder happened in front of everybody's eyes, but the mystery was more complicated than everybody thought. This book has a classic Agatha Christie style, complicated relationships, immersive world building or village building, sharp observations on the humanity by Miss Marple, and most importantly, a twisting plot that keep you guessing until the very end. I really enjoyed reading this book, and the characterization of this book is wonderful, and Agatha Christie is dropping clues in front of your eyes all the time, but you just cannot get it right. Actually, this is one of the reasons why I love her so much, because she doesn't hide any clue from you. So needless to say, I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and I feel like this is such a comforting and a relaxing read. I mean, it's Agatha Christie, what more can I say? Then I finished reading the shortlist for Women's Prize, and I got brain dead for a while. So I picked up the audiobook of The Guest List by Lucy Foley, just wanted to get entertained and unwind. I used to be a heavy thriller reader when Gone Girl was first adapted into movies, but after a while I got tired of the trope of an unreliable female narrator who's often drunk, so I stopped reading. But from time to time, I still pick up books like this when I don't want to think about reading, but I also want to read. And this is an example of that. All of that is to say, I went into this book without carrying much of my brain, so I don't have a comprehensive review of this book. I just have some impressions. The story was set on an isolated island, which is, of course, it's a classic setting for such a thriller, and a young couple is hosting their wedding on the island where the groom is a celebrity and the bride is equally successful. And they invited a bunch of guests, and the guests, they all come in with all their secrets and their thoughts, like dark thoughts, and of course things started to happen and people are having a hard time getting out because they are stuck on the island, and we started to reveal all the secrets of all the guests, hence the title The Guest List, and to know the truth behind the whole event. And my first impression of this book or the characters is, what a bunch of horrible characters. And different from mystery novels that I usually like to read, the mystery part doesn't come in until the second half of the book, so I was pretty much lost the first half of the book. And I know the author is trying so hard to create a thrilling and gruesome environment for this isolated island, but the more that I know that, the less scared I am. And in the end, it just became me speculating when is the mystery gonna come up in the story. And then later on, with the secrets or the mystery really revealed, it did explain why some of the characters are so horrible, but also in a way that is too convenient. And because there are so many characters, I feel like this book relied heavily on the kind of a cliche stereotype of different personalities. It's like a collection of predictable characters, which I I'm not sure if I like. However, when I was reading this book, I was pretty tired from a bunch of literary fiction and historical fiction that I read. So I was indeed entertained by this book. So on that aspect, I feel like this book did its job. Next, I read my most anticipated release of the year, and it is Pageboy by Elliot Page. I also went to his book tour and got this signed copy from him, and I'm so happy about it. That event was such a blast, and I have a whole vlog documenting my experience reading this book and going to the book tour, which I'll link down below. And Willow from Books and Bell also has a wonderful review where she examined the narrative of this book and also talked about how important this book it is. It is one of the reviews that got me questioning like what am I doing here on BookTube, because I feel like I can never be as articulate as her. So I highly recommending you to check out that review, which I'll also link down below. Anyhow, after I raved about this book already so much on my channel and also questioned my existence as a book reviewer, I still want to wrap it up because I just love it so much. I do want to point out that I'm a big fan of Elliot Page for almost 2 decades, so my review might be biased, but I do think it is a great book. This is a deeply personal coming-of-age memoir of Elliot, talking about his experience growing up, including but not limited to his transition. He talks about his gender dysphoria over the years and the discomfort that he has with his body growing up. Growing up also as a public figure, he also had this extreme pressure from the audience to fit into a certain image, which added another layer of discomfort of his. And I like how he shared candidly about his struggles, his coming to terms with himself, his self-acceptance, and I found it deeply moving and beautiful. But I also love the fact that this book is so much more than that. I like how he shared other aspects of himself, including his family when he was little, his career and his relationships and personal life after he started to working in Hollywood, and also his relationship with acting and how his career plays a role into his growth. And I also feel like this book is highly reflective. I feel like this is one of the books where after you read it, you feel like you know him a lot more better, and he himself knows himself a lot more better after writing as well. So all I wanted to say here is that this is a well-written, brilliant memoir, and he is so brave for putting his journey out there in the world, and I highly recommend all of you guys to read it. Following, I read and loved a novel called Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda Lo. This is a historical fiction set in the 1950s during the Red Scare in Chinatown in San Francisco. The protagonist is called Lily, is a Chinese-American high school girl in her senior year, and she is smart, hardworking, and she is also raised up to be the perfect Chinese girl. However, she has her own desires and dreams, and more importantly, she started to discover her sexuality, and she found herself especially drawn to this girl called Kathleen, who is one of her classmates. And things get more clear and more complicated after she and Kath started to go to the Telegraph Club. I adore this book so much. I have to say that I wanted to read this book because of its cover, and I'm so glad I did. First of all, I love the historical cultural aspect of this book so much. After I got assigned to read The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan in high school, I got a little bit of a Amy Tan PTSD feel well, because I just feel like the renaissance of the mahjong tiles in Amy Tan's books kind of overshadows all the other aspects of the culture of Chinese American, so I tend to avoid other books with similar settings, but this book is like a breath of fresh air. This book also came to me at the perfect time after I started to grow more and more fond of the city of San Francisco and wanted to learn more about its iconic Chinatown. And the author evidently did a large amount of research about Chinatown in San Francisco, and you can really tell that she's a lover of San Francisco and its rich heritage. I was immersed in the historical setting of this book, and because I live in Bay Area and I go to San Francisco quite a lot, so of course I got excited whenever places that I know was mentioned in this book. This book was also set during the second wave of the Red Scare. It is a time where America is really really scared of the rise of communism. So of course, Chinese Americans at that time was widely suspected and discriminated. The author skillfully weaved this historical and culture backdrop into the story, resulting in a brilliant and poignant storyline. All the characters in this book are well-rounded and multidimensional, especially our protagonist Lily, who has many layers of self-realization and development throughout the story. Her self-discovery was crafted with great sensitivity and authenticity. On top of that, she also reflects on a lot of other things in her life, including family, friendship, the meaning of community, and a lot more. And I just love her development so much. The plot of this book is compelling as well. It is truly a page-turner. Although I was listening to this on audio, I just couldn't stop myself from listening. But speaking of the audio, this is my only minor complaint about the projection of the audiobook, not about the book itself. It's the narrator. I feel like she doesn't speak Mandarin Chinese, so there are a couple of Mandarin Chinese dialogue in the book that when the narrator was trying to say them in Mandarin Chinese, I feel like she was struggling so hard. But I do feel like she speaks Cantonese. However, I don't personally speak Cantonese, so I can't really tell about that. So I just feel like maybe for books like this, which have very little dialogue in Mandarin Chinese or Cantonese, if we cannot find a narrator who speaks all English, Cantonese, and Mandarin, maybe we can have some other ways of produce the audiobook. But besides that, I have no complaint about this book itself. I love it so much, and yeah, please read it if you haven't. Then I read a nonfiction called Strangers to Ourselves by Rachel Aviv, and this is a essay collection and a case study about different individuals in which their story kind of challenged the limit of conventional psychiatry and also reshaped our understanding of mental health. The book started captivating and very strong with a personal story of Rachel's. She was diagnosed with anorexia at the age of 6, so she became the youngest patient who has ever been diagnosed with anorexia. But the interesting thing is, at that time, she didn't know a lot of the conventional causes of anorexia, so the causes of her case was unclear. She then went on and explored different interesting mental health cases, including a man who kept asking and exploring his own history, a woman in India who was basically a stray from her family in the beginning, but then in the end she was cherished to be a saint, and also a young woman who got out of her medicine just to see who she really was. However, after the strong start of the book, the first chapter was not as compelling, so that is where I started to get worried. But luckily, this book didn't go downhill from there. It actually picked up from the second chapter. Rachel looks at different cases with compassion and care, and she provides background stories, culture analysis, and sometimes social commentary at the exact moment needed without overshadowing the narrative. So I feel like except the first chapter, the rest part of the book are all very enjoyable. I really loved a quote from this book by a point of view of a doctor. After the doctor seeing his patient get on medicine and became more acceptable by the society, the doctor said, seeing how poorly patients fared when they were cautious and inhibited, and how the same people flourished once medication had made them assertive and flexible, I developed a strong impression of how our culture favors one interpretation style over another. I feel like this quote alone is worth discussing and worth us to reflecting upon it for a long time. So I feel like this book is very well worth reading and a very meaningful read, and I also feel like it will broaden our understanding of mental health for sure. Secondly, I read one of the books in Chinese that I held. It is called 足利女童连续失踪事件 by Kimizu Kiyoshi. This is the title of this book translates to the serial missing cases of schoolgirls in Ashikaga, and it was a book translated from Japanese to Chinese. The Japanese original title is called 殺人犯はそこにいる. This is a true crime book with captivating investigative cases, and in the end, it was surprisingly thought-provoking. From 1979 to 1990, there are 4 schoolgirls aged from 5 to 8 went missing in a small area in Japan near Ashikaga, and the interesting thing is the 4 cases actually fall into 2 different cities and fall into 2 different police departments. So because of that, the police failed to make connection of all the 4 cases, and in 1991, one of the police stations declared that they caught a person that they believed to be the murderer, and the person was sentenced to death, and they closed the cases. However, 5 years later, another schoolgirl went missing in the same area, and that prompted the investigation of the author Shimizu Kiyoshi, and his investigation actually led to the police to reopen the cases. Shimizu conducted a comprehensive investigation of the cases and establishing connections as well as thoroughly explaining the techniques that he used to investigate. And as usual, he fearlessly called out the police when they made mistakes, or even worse in this book, the police was trying to conceal evidence or clues because they were not in favor of their assumptions. And the police in this book were as disappointed as usual. If you have seen me talking about these other books by this author, you'll know that I love reading about the cases that he's on, because I feel like as an investigation journalist, he tends to pick very intriguing cases that you just wanted to figure out what happened next, and he often pushed forward the legal system in Japan, which on that aspect I feel like he is great. However, I am always struggling on his writing, and this book is no exception. And for this book, I don't even want to talk about the tiny things like how many times he wrote about his clicking his pen. Like, what do I make of that information, right? The thing that drove me crazy in this book is that he said he found out an important clue in chapter 3, and then he didn't tell you what it is for another like 100 pages. So I feel like for a nonfiction, just present us the clues and evidence that you found as you go. Like, I don't understand the cliffhanger thing. Like, you're not a fictional novel. You're a investigation of like a true crime. Like, please tell me all the things that you found. Compared to himself as a writer, this is one of his fairly new books. I feel like he did improve as a writer. However, it's not saying that he's a better writer now. He's just a better mediocre writer, if you will. And speaking of the case itself, I did not see the ending coming, and I feel like this is because of that, this book is surprisingly thought-provoking and a very important read if you can read it. And the last book I read this month was the second memoir of the month, and it is Dear Senthuran by Akwaeke Emezi. And this is a deeply personal and spiritual memoir, which I very much enjoyed. But before I say anything else, I just want to say, when I was putting up this wrap-up together, I found out that they released 2 songs and music videos this year. And I've been listening to those songs and they are pretty good. And I just feel like, what can they do? Back to this book, this is a very special memoir. Rachel Aviv said on Goodreads that she has never read anything like it, and I completely agree. I mean, who am I to not agree with Rachel Aviv? Akwaeke Emezi led you into their personal lives and all the intimate moments because they were writing letters to friends, but actually to the audience, but by doing so, they feel like they can be more vulnerable this way. And they talk boldly about their personal lives, relationships, careers, and ambitions, and talking openly about the life as a writer and the struggles to get published when they first started, and now they're like future huge goals. But this book also dived deeply into their spiritual world and introduced us their personal belief that is rooted into the Igbo belief systems. They are an Obanji, so this book provides us unique standpoint navigating the world from a Obanji's point of view. The only thing that I personally know about Igbo culture is the thing that I learned from Freshwater, which is their debut novel. So at first I found it's hard for me to articulate my thoughts when I was reading about their spiritual world, but then I realized it is actually a philosophy. It is a shift in perception and allowing us to view the world from a completely new standpoint. On top of that, the way that they adapted to their human bodies based on this Obenji lifestyle or this Igbo belief system is also fascinating. It was a hard process for them as well as for the readers, especially when they were talking openly about their suicidal attempts. This is where I feel like things can get a little bit triggering because it is very detailed. So I'll advise you to go into this book prepared. However, I do like this book a lot, and I recommended this book to the people especially who has already read their works before and wanted to know more about them as a writer. And that concludes all the books that I've read in June. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you have any thoughts to the books that I mentioned, and also what did you read in June. Don't forget to say hi in the comment section down below. Thumbs up to this video if you liked it, and I wish you happy reading. Stay healthy, stay safe. I'll see you in my next bookish video. Bye!